Hi, my name is John Kaplinger, and I'm a QA analyst here at Livefront. Welcome to part 2 of my 5-part series on accessibility testing for native apps. Today we're going to be talking about dynamic type and font size testing. Be sure to check out part 1 of this 5-part series where I talk about what accessibility testing is and why it's important. So let's get into it. What is dynamic type or font size testing? Who uses it? How do I adjust it on my device? What should I test? And some tips and tricks and gotchas that I've found while testing myself. Well, what is it? It's a type customization tool that allows users to adjust the size of the font so that they can enlarge it or minimize it depending on what they want to use it for. So who uses it? Well, people who need larger text for readability, people who want to have smaller text so they can fit more content on their screens, and people who need that additional distinction for text components. So how do I adjust text sizing on my Apple device? Well, it's a setting within your settings app. You just go in there, search for text size. Then within there, you'll get a little slider at the bottom and you can adjust it to whatever size you want. You can also do this by enabling that setting within your control center. So if you go into the settings app, into the control center menu, there's an option to include text size in that list. So then when you open the control center, you can just go to that shortcut, enable the text size to whatever size you need, and then return to the app. Android has the similar thing. They just call it font sizing. So once again, you go into the settings app, you can search for font. It's usually under the display menu. Once you get in there, there'll be a font and size setting or screen zoom display. It's a little different on Android, but there'll be some setting there. You get into the font size menu and then you'll have the same sort of slider that you can adjust the size of the text to whichever size you want. Same thing with Android. It's got a shortcut capability as well. What you can do is you can add a little accessibility menu shortcut button to the bottom of your controls, and then you can just enable it from there. So speeds up testing. So what are some things I should be testing when testing dynamic type or font size? Well, is the text legible at different sizes? How well does the text fit within on the screen? And can I still navigate to every part of the app? So what are some things I should be testing to make sure that text is legible in different sizes? The WCAG guidelines give you pretty exact rules on what should be tested for on the different levels. At AA, you should be testing at least at 200%. So making sure that at 200%, the app still is legible and functional. Unfortunately, Android doesn't have a thing that says 200%, it just says extra large or extra large, and iOS for some reason only jumps between 190% and 235%. So I'm usually testing at 235%, so we should be testing for at least that. Also, making sure that important messages and text is not truncated so that you're not getting just part of the word. And also just like making sure that text components don't overlap, that I'm not viewing my text wrapping over my band name, or as you can see here, the band name hiding behind the time. What are some things that you should test to make sure that the text fits well on the screen? Again, this is pretty easy. You're going through the app, you just check all the components, check out how the text fits. Does it bleed out of areas? Is it capable to reach all the areas still that are on the app? Like, is something so big that you can't access it now because it's off the bottom of the screen? What are some things I should test when making sure that I can still navigate to every part? The biggest thing here is, making sure that large text doesn't overlap something that's functional and then disable its functionality, or that the continue button at the bottom of the screen is still accessible and isn't hidden because the text is so large. Also, making sure that like prompt messages, when they appear, that they still fit within the prompt and aren't bleeding out, or if they're in the prompt and the prompt isn't scrollable, that you can't read everything within that prompt. It should at least be scrollable to see all of it. So what are some tips for testing with dynamic type and font sizing? Definitely use the shortcuts. That's the best way to speed up your testing. Personally, I always background the app before I adjust the setting, because I've noticed that if I adjust the setting while I'm within the app, it can cause some adverse effects that don't normally happen if you do it outside the app. And I wouldn't expect most users to be adjusting their text within an app. Usually, if these are dynamic text font size users, they already have that setting set. Also making sure that testing on a variety of devices, like different display settings, especially on iOS, like the notched versus the unnotched devices, those can cause issues. But yeah, it can be different also on different OSs. The way that the text is handled can be different on different OSs. Some tricks, well, on Android, to maximize, you can really maximize the visual setting. You can adjust the font size setting, and you can adjust a screen zoom setting, which allows you to get everything really big. One thing on iOS, for iOS 16, you can actually enable the font size settings for specific apps. So you don't have to do it for your entire device. If you wanted to make sure that you're always testing something in large font, you can actually go into that app settings and enable it so that it will only adjust that app settings. So what are some gotchas? Well, like I said before, adjusting the font size while within the app can cause some adverse effects. Also, icons. Icons aren't always necessarily needed to be increased in size when the font size increases. So ask your designers what's expected there, really. If it's functional, it should, usually needs to be enlarged, but if it's non-functional and just decorative, it can usually just remain the small size and have everything else enlarge around it. Also, there's not a WCAG guideline for truncating text versus wrapping it, but ask your designers. Some things it's good to have truncated. You could probably have like an address truncated, but like the name of a product, you probably want to have that wrapped when the text is large. Along with great accessibility testing comes great bug reporting. So what should you include in your bug reports? Well, include a video of your test or screenshot. Describe what the expectations were, like if you expected the font to wrap, not truncate, yes, in a certain spot, you should express that. Express the impact of it. So if it is an important thing that's being truncated, maybe you should express that it should be something that's wrapped, because otherwise you won't know what it is. As well as provide any WCAG guidelines that are relevant to the issue or describe the impact. Congratulations, you now know the basics of testing a native app for dynamic text or font sizing. What we learned: making sure that the app's text is enlarged, that the text does not bleed outside of the element it's contained in, making sure that important text is wrapped versus truncated, and making sure that all components can still be accessed via scroll. Now go out and use this knowledge to improve 100% of users' digital experiences. And be sure to check out part 3 of my 5-part series where I talk about testing with keyboard navigation.